Hey guys, on today's podcast, I sit down with Kenisha Anthony. She is a foster child turned child welfare advocate. She's amazing. She wrote this, she is the author of Labeled Ward of the State, which is a great memoir of hers. Basically, how she was in foster care, but the multiple social workers and mistakes that the system made, where she really just fell through the cracks. She was in the Florida child welfare system, and her story is just really sad with how many mistakes were made in her case. So she has grown up, and she has her bachelor's in social work, and she has her master's in business administration, and she's just into advocating for child welfare and hopefully trying to change policy with her master's in business administration. So that's where she's at. She's promoting her book like crazy, but she currently works as a social worker, so she sees clients and she's working towards reform. There has been quite a bit of child welfare reform since she was in the system, but just great interview with her. I think you guys are really going to like it. Here we go. Hi, I'm Rebecca Britt, and this is the Stable Moments Podcast, the show where we discuss all things related to the foster care system and early childhood trauma, from foster parents, trauma experts, former foster kids, and beyond. We'll take a deep dive into the complexities of the foster care crisis in an effort to better understand how to fix it. Well, thanks for meeting with me today. I was so excited to see. I don't even know necessarily where I heard about your book, but I follow so much social media in the foster and adoption space that I saw it coming out, and I love not only new books on the topic, but specifically memoirs or ones that document real experiences. What we've heard a lot on this podcast is the people that are making the decisions about foster and adoption laws typically haven't experienced firsthand foster care, or don't have kids adopted out of foster care, or are removed from the situation. So one of the things this podcast strives to do is get the real voices at the table. So I've read your book. I absolutely love it. It's a brave piece of art, and I know that it's difficult as a social worker to decide when and how much of your story to tell. So it's a bold move, and you're not even 30 yet, right?
No, I'm not 30. I am not 30.
Well, that's awesome.
Almost there.
That's awesome. At least you can say all that stuff I did in my 20s, and then you got a book out of it.
That is true. That is true. Most people, when I tell people, well, now I just turned 28. So they're like, you're 20. At first it was like, you're 27 with a memoir. Like, what do you have to talk about in a memoir? So it was like, you just really don't know what people been through in 27 years.
No, well, that's true. And you're like, I hope that the next 20 aren't something to write about in this fashion.
That is true. It seems that it's going in that direction. So
yeah, you're making sure.
Just hope it keeps going that way. But yeah.
Well, so tell everyone a little bit about your background. Where were you born? Tell us a little bit about your family of origin.
So my name is Kenisha Anthony. I was born and raised in Miami, Florida. I still live in Miami, Florida. I've only ever lived in Florida my whole life. My family, people have been asking me a lot of questions about my family of origin, and the only thing that I can tell you about my family of origin is that we lived in Miami, Florida. I promise you that's all that I know, and it's something else that's making me think about it. And I was kind of like, where is my family from? And I know, like, my aunt, who I talk about, my great aunt, who I talk about in the book, like, the furthest I ever know is that she lived in Hartford, Connecticut in a time of her life. How she got there, I don't know. Why she was there, I don't know. But she went to, like, she lived, I know for some time she lived in Miami, and then she moved to Connecticut, and then she moved back to in Florida. But that's like the most I know about my family of origin. So, but for me, I'm just a young black girl that was born and raised in Miami, Florida. I still live here, and I'm just really trying to see what the future holds for me.
I love it. Where tell us how you first came into care and what you know about that.
I came into care, well, I came into contact with the child welfare system at the age of 4 due to abandonment and neglect. Both my mother and my father had drug addictions, and from what was, I don't, from my own personal knowledge, I was 4 years old, so I don't really know what was happening around me.
Sure.
Through having conversations with my older sister, she would say it was like what was going on was that my mother had lost her husband at the time, and she was trying to recoup from losing her husband and now being responsible for everything and having 3 children and trying to figure out that whole process financially. And that's how I came into contact. And then, like, I guess my mother just basically had, she wasn't figuring it out in a timely fashion, and she was relying on like her husband's family to care for us and help her through the process.
Mm.
But like the way how my sister describes it to me is like she had an envious sister who called the system on us.
Mm.
And for me, in that, like, listening to it and knowing the system now, I'm like, if she was reaching out to our family, this system operates on family support. So it was just a very weird situation to me when she was telling it to me. So it was definitely about my mom. She had a drug addiction. I requested my file from the child welfare system, and I read their perspective of what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
And according to the file, my daddy, he abandoned me and he was never in my life. That's what the file says. But so that's why, like, in the book, I start off by saying what the file say, and then I go into saying, like, this is what I know from my knowledge. I don't know where they got this information
Right.
from. So that was like definitely how I came into contact with the child welfare system. It was like the legal terms would be abandonment and neglect, but my mother was having financial issues and suffering. She fell victim to drugs, and like some family drama along the way came into it, and this is how I ultimately got removed from the care of my mother.
So they substantiated the abuse and neglect in some way, or did your mom relinquish her rights?
My mother, she didn't relinquish her rights. And I came into care in 1996. So the system was operating in a totally different mechanism than what it is today. Although much haven't changed from the research that I've done,
Mm-hmm.
it's like different precautions have been put into place. But when I talked to, again, I was so young. Of course, I really didn't even understand
Sure.
what was happening around me. And just talking to people, and I really, like I said, that I would go further into this in details, and I really didn't want to express it in my book because I feel like I really can't explain it.
Mm-hmm.
So um in my book, I do like mention kind of the ideology that my grandmother, I call her my grandmother, had at the time. But the way how my sister, because my grandmother, she would not have this conversation with me at all. It's like she leaves stuff, painful stuff in the past, and she
Sure.
don't want to revisit it. But in talking to my older sister, she was explaining to me that the mentality that the system had and the mentality that the customers adapted to was you do everything that they say and you don't say nothing, and you don't, because you don't want to say anything wrong because it will be held against you. So the advice that my grandmother gave my mother was like, just do whatever they say. And like, and because my grandma, she experienced having her children removed from her, and she was and this is information that my sister gave me, was saying that my grandmother was uh, just terrified of them and not wanting to make the wrong move to get her children back. So she just adapted to this mentality that if you have a badge, I'm gonna do whatever you say, whether it's wrong or right.
I understand that totally. So I didn't realize that your grandmother had had her own kids removed prior. So she took you in, and your mom wasn't able to get off the drugs or do whatever she needed to do to get you back. Eventually, her rights were terminated within the system.
No, my mother rights never was terminated.
Oh
Although
wow,
in the file it goes back and forth. Like sometimes it'll say that her rights were terminated, other times it'll say that her rights were never terminated. Ultimately, when I have my birth certificate, it still has my mother's name on there. So
sure.
through that, I know, okay, her rights never were terminated. But she never was able to reunify with us. However, my sister will say that my mother tried, but whatever she was doing and trying, it wasn't good enough. Or she felt oppressed in some way, which most parents, they try so hard and they try so hard, and some people keep trying to get it and get through it, and then some people just give up. So from the information that I'm receiving, from how the system may have treated my mother, she may have just given up and felt like she wasn't good enough to get through the process.
Well, and she didn't completely give up because at some point in your teens, right, you did spend some time back with her.
Right. So throughout different times of my life, I did spend time with her. She got into programs, but she never went about it the legal way. She never went back before the court to be able to see me or reunify with me. So, I mean, that can give me insight on that. Maybe the system did beat her down when she was trying, so she never went back to them because she felt like that was a hopeless avenue. But again, I can't, and she's deceased now, so I don't know what really happened there. So it's just like I'm just left in this limbo, because even when I have my case file, it doesn't tell me. It doesn't, like, from how I know what court documents look like and the processes of them, it doesn't say, okay, in 6 months we reevaluating where the family's at. Mom is in non-compliance. We don't know where she's at. She's not cooperating with court orders. I don't have any of that information to rely on to say what was actually going on between the system and my mother. But yeah, she did try and re-engage with me throughout different times of my life.
Right. And honestly, the system didn't even know. It seems like in your book they didn't even know that she was re-engaging. They seemed very disengaged with you throughout your childhood. So, I'm a social worker as well, and your book was very enlightening to me because I just felt like, we talk about kids falling through the cracks. Like, this was a real story of like nobody's checking up on this kid ever. So
Hmm.
you had all these different placements, but none of them, or maybe just a couple of them, were even known to Department of Children and Families. You were kind of able to be passed around to different family members, different friends, parents, or whatever. And as far as your experience, I want you to tell me a little bit about, how your different placements came to be. But as far as your experience today as a social worker, do you think that that is common, where tabs on a kid can just not be kept?
I wouldn't, like, today here in Florida, because the way how home visits are documented now is that you have to take the picture of it have GPS coordination on it now.
Ooh.
So when you take the picture, you have to allow it's this circle thing that pops up on the screen. And once you have to let it load all the way, and then it will capture your GPS, your location. And if you're not at the child's home that matches what's in the system, it will show up as if this home visit was never done. So administrators will question, okay, what happened? What something happened here, and then they can ask you what happened. Now, kids falling through the system how I did, I think that's like one provision that was put in place to keep that from happening. So I think that there has been improvement in that area. So I don't think that if a child was to fall through the cracks now, that means a lot of people just drop the ball all the way.
Mm-hmm. Because I was thinking, even if a social worker, so in your case, you talk a lot about falsifying documents. Like there might have been home visits reported, they just didn't happen. And there's a lot of things that to blame there. It's not just one bad social worker. It's just an overridden system with not very good checks and balances. But yeah, even in the system you talk about today, like it's not a fix all, because if you don't have a system that alerts like, hey, it's been a month and this kid hasn't been seen, or you don't have administrators that are checking those GPS pings. I don't know if you have caseworkers that have learned that they can just kind of like drive by the house and let the GPS ping. Like there's ways that everybody tries to fulfill what's expected of them. So I just felt like your case was such a gross example of like nobody taking duty of care. Like nobody's had eyes on this kid, and at times could not tell you what residence or who her care provider is, to the point that I forget if it was, I don't think it was your sister, but there was somebody that was getting your payments, but you were not in their home. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So you're talking about my aunt.
Hmm. Is this the one that was
So
envious?
right,
Okay.
this is her. So um I'm a child, and I of course I don't know how this system operates. I don't even know that you get paid for children, that whether if you're a relative, license placement, or whatever. I don't even know all of this at the time. But when I was talking to my great aunt, and she mentioned like, you've been up here all summer, and she should have, like, my aunt should have sent the money up here because you've been up here for more than 2 months. And it made me, and this is what made me think about, like, so she get money from me.
I
And
should
I
get the
it made
money.
I'm like, so why don't I get, I'm thinking like, why don't I get the things that I want? Like, why is it that I always feel like an outcast if she actually gets money from me? So when I left from with her, it was like, when I left from with her to live with my sister, and my sister, she doesn't get any money from me. It was like, okay, what w- so who's getting the money from me, because I never went back home with my mom, so where's the money going? But as I got older and you become more aware of what's actually going on, it was and you listen to the rumors that was going on around in my family, and like, my family, people in my family actually do fraud, so, well, did fraud. So it was like, I can't really say like this is exactly what she was doing, but I do know, like, from hearing rumors around my family, that people know how to beat the system and do what they need to do. So it was just an idea that after I was no longer living with her, she continued to collect money on my behalf, even though I wasn't with her. And for me, it was like, she said that she legally relinquished custodial rights over me, and she no longer receives money from me. But as I was growing and I realized that, and knowing the system, we never went to court for you to do this. So, and for it's like something would have triggered in that moment that if you would have called the Department of Children and Families and said that this child who you guys placed in my care, I no longer want, something would have had to happen. So because that didn't happen, it's like what happened in this moment for you to be able to do this? So that's why later on, when I did come back in contact with the system, she was charged with abandonment.
Oh, she was. So what is
Right.
well, because I was thinking like I'm like, she's probably not going to call and say, hey, stop sending these checks. It's not, it's not like, I know that it is fraud, but I feel like it's one of those like, as soon as somebody catches on, I guess I will just stop getting paid. Um, but that's interesting to me that she actually got charged with abandonment. So what is that charge, and what what could somebody face with that charge?
Nothing.
Oh,
And what and this is something that I've learned, like as I worked in this, there's really no consequences to these charges. It's like, okay, you're charged with abandonment. Okay, you abandoned her, and it's just enough to actually shelter a child. And then it's like, do we have another caregiver? How are we going to move forward? What are we going to do with this child at this point? And that's just basically what it is. It's the caregivers, they don't go to jails. It's no consequences to abandonment.
do they have to pay back what they've received?
So I don't I don't know. I don't know. I didn't even really go far
Sure.
into that, but for sure, I know that like one time when I was having a conversation with my dad, he was getting Social Security and he mentioned to me like he was paying back child support for um he was paying back child support because I was in the system. So for me, I'm just thinking in my mind, like, okay, so if I was lost in the system and you guys were not even caring for me, or somebody had to be giving money somewhere for him to have been charged back child support. So it's a lot of things that I can't explain, and it was just a lot. That was more of the reasons why I didn't try even to explain them, and I just wrote the book in a way where I would leave it for people to think, because I don't have the answers, and it's just something that professionals or other people can think about when they come, if they are in this situation, or what if you're a professional, of course, dealing with it on a day-to-day basis, because it's just a lot of things as that I can't explain, that I don't understand what happened in my life. And it was a lot of adults that were involved in the situation that was not stable. It wasn't healthy, and that is why I experienced all of the things that I experienced as a child, which I think that no child should have to experience.
Yeah, your book's called Label Ward of the State, and I know that you were technically removed. I felt like while I was reading it, like you were technically removed, and that's about all that happened. And like you showed back up when you were like aging out. Like, okay, so how does this work? And can I get some resources? And they were like, no. Like, you'd almost think that they'd give you some just for like, this has been a huge miscarriage of justice. What, for in your experience or from your words, what do you feel like the state offered you? Like, to me it feels like you could have done nothing. You could have not been removed. They could have never been called, and your outcomes would have been the exact same. I mean, it was friends and family that you lived with, and they didn't know about
So in the beginning, when they removed and they put me in my first placement, they knew about this. How how did it go on a journey that they didn't know about? Again, I just, off of research, it's like, well, maybe it was a burdened workforce where um social workers were in and out every single day. So it's like, today, here somebody's hired and you're giving them a caseload, and then they looking at this like, I'm not doing this, and then they quit tomorrow. So it's kind of like your case go back on the shelf. So that's how I think that my family caseload fell through the cracks, because even for like in talking to my sister, because she's 10 years older than me, so she has more memory of what was going on at the time. And my file says that they referred my family to services. My sister says that we never engaged in any services. Just the other day I was having a conversation with her, and I was saying, my file doesn't say what was the visitation order for our mother to see us. And she told me a conversation that she had with her grandmother. Well, so it's like, I have grown to call this person my grandmother, but she's really not my biological grandmother.
Sure.
Um, she said, in having a conversation with her, the state ordered that my mother had no contact with us.
Okay.
So it was just, I don't know how it ended up to fall through this situation, but the most interesting part about it was that even when I lived with other people, things were happening and the state was being called, and they were in our house, they were in our presence. So these placements that I'm talking about, when I'm reading my file, it was like you guys really did know that I was there, but you just were not doing anything about it. So if a new allegation was called in, you will come and you will investigate on the surface of what was going on and not look further into the situation. So when I was almost molested by my sister's boyfriend, the state was called,
Oh, right.
and you're looking at the situation as, okay, did this rape happen? This is what you're looking at, but you're not even asking. You didn't take that one step further and say, well, why is this child even in this house? Like, where
Mm.
is the care? You were supposed to look for, if my aunt was my caregiver, you were supposed to look for her and say, well, why is she not in your home? So when I'm looking at all of these situations, I'm just thinking of it as, so people just really were not doing their job and just dropping the ball along the way, and the ball just kept getting dropped. And in the end, when I was about 16, you asked me what did the state offer me. So they offered me supervision. So now when I'm 16, I have monthly supervision. I have it was like to me, the ball was dropped so much that the caregiver that I was living with, they didn't even see the case appropriate to close before I turned 18. So it was like, no, we can't even take eyes off of this child anymore, because so much has happened over the years that now we're here and we see her. It's like, we're going to give her in Florida, it's called APLA, another permanent planned living arrangement. So you didn't even see this placement fit to close the case out prior to me before I turned 18, and permanent guardianship, or I know that they were like, due to licensing and the caregiver complaining about not receiving any money from me because she wasn't my relative.
Mm-hmm.
They were exploring adoption, but she couldn't, or like turning her house into a licensed foster home. But she had an issue with domestic violence in the past. So just because she was a victim to that, they didn't approve her for licensing. So it was like, okay, that's not a permanent this is not a situation that we feel that we can close in any way, shape, or form. So they kept, like, the case just stayed open until I was 18. So I got supervision, I got Medicaid, I received the tuition exemption waiver, I received, yeah, that was just basically all that I got, and
When did
gift
the
cards every
supervision
now and then.
start?
When I had to be I was 16.
And what did that look like? What does supervision mean?
So supervision means that that your assigned caseworker comes to your house every month or as necessary to evaluate your home environment and assess for safety. Is this house still safe for this child? Is there food? Does she have appropriate sleeping arrangements? Does she have storage space? And what's going on in the home. And the interesting part about that was, when I knew what I was feeling in the home, and I knew what was actually occurring in the conversations that was being had in the home. And when I received my file to read that, my caseworker was documenting that the caregiver that I had was telling the state, because everybody have this everybody thinks they know what the system is, but I promise you, in a holistic view, people who don't work in it, they do not understand how this really works. So people think that once you are a child that's removed from your parent, whatever placement you lived in, a check comes with this child. This is what people think, and that's not the truth at all. But even as a child for myself, thinking, well, of course, this being the information that I'm receiving, I'm not I'm not understanding why they're not giving me any help either, any financial help, because you're dictating my life. So I don't understand why you're not helping me just because of the kind of placement that I live in. But that you put me in, you did the home study and you approved this placement. So you see it fit for me to live here. But because of my relationship with the person who's the caregiver, you're like, we can't provide you any money for this child. So I was very confused during that whole living arrangement. And then for the caseworker to document that the caregiver was telling him and her, because I had different case managers, that if you don't give me any money for this child, she have to get out of my house. I
Mm-hmm.
cannot care for her. So for me, I was thinking, I'm looking at this like, as a caseworker, if I had not even a parent, if I had someone who was caring for a child tell me this, that's something immediately that I have to act on, because that's not a permanent healthy placement for this child, because money is really the driving factor here. And if this person doesn't get this child is going to be homeless. So there, I have to do something about that. So when I'm reading the file and I'm seeing that this is actually what my caseworker is documenting in his home visit notes, I'm asking myself again, where's the oversight? Is the supervisor reading this? Because this is what I would say, well, what did she tell you at the last home visit? She's going to tell you this every home visit and you're not going to do anything about it. I would feel that this is not the most appropriate placement for this child. And it, in the long run, it cost me a home. It cost me the permanency plan that they had for me. Like, this was supposed to be my permanent connection. I don't have a relationship with this caregiver today. So it wasn't a long-term relationship that you guys, based on permanency goals, just the plan failed.
So, so if a biologically related person wants to take in somebody that is related to them, they still have to go through the home study and all that, but it's not assumed that they would get any type of stipend for that. And you were saying, like, okay, this is driven by money, so we need to look at that. But it might be legitimately that, like, hey, I'm her biological relative, I can consider taking her in, we have no money. Is financial stability part of the home study?
Financial stability is a part of home studies, and if I in cases I've seen, if you're not $100 over your monthly bills, they'll say that you're not financially fit to care for this child. However, it all depends on who's evaluating the home study that's completed, if they're going to let this go or if they're not. But also, this particular placement was not I was not biologically related to her.
Okay.
This is a non-relative, someone who's not related to me.
So what is the determining factor for whether you get money or not?
Blood biological relationship.
But she wasn't able to get money even though she
No,
wasn't biologically related?
she's not by, so you have to either be a blood, well, the system have now changed, which I did explain in my book, because it things like this drive people so crazy that you would think that it's the most common thing, that this is common sense. So yeah, of course you're gonna get money. No. So back before, I want to say, let's say about not too long ago, like it was a few years ago in the 2000s. Like after 20, it was after, I can't remember the exact year that the non-relatives was included, but I definitely advocated for it. But um So at the time, the determining factor to receive money was you either had to be biologically related to the child or you had to be a licensed placement by the state.
Okay,
So if you were not those two, you can still take this child, but we're not going to give you any money for her.
sure. So wait, that feels so backwards because it's like you don't actually have to be fit. You don't have to be biologically related. We're not going to Oh, but they do look into the person. They just don't give you any money.
Right.
Right. So having a home study and all of that is not the same thing as becoming a licensed. That's, doing all the classes and everything you need to do to become a licensed foster placement.
That's doing classes is just the extra step, but you still go through the home study process.
Right.
So the only thing is that you don't have to do the classes. And it's like you can take this one person.
It's crazy. It's crazy. So, um, we did talk about, what you felt like the benefits were. And is it fair to say that you felt like the biggest failure was just like repeated non-oversight?
Yes, I can agree to that. And the resources that are available to youth based on their placement statuses. For me, it was just like I said, you have these ideas that, okay, for sure you came into my house and you removed me. For sure you get to dictate where I live and who I stay with. And the thing for me was in that position as a child, I'm looking at the person that I live with as my caregiver, and then I'm looking at the state as my caregiver as well. So it's like I'm thinking in my mind that if this person don't do what they're supposed to do, the state will be my safety net.
Mm.
But because of my placement status, it it don't turn out to be that way. So I was very disappointed I was very disappointed and I was very lost about what my actual current status was. And I didn't fully understand it until I worked in the system to and to really gain like insight on what needs to be fixed about this situation, because again, the same way how a licensed person can put you out of their house at 18 or in the middle of the night, a non-relative can do the same thing. They have no actual obligations to this child, which is why I believe that at the end of the day, the child should be first in every corner that you turn in this system. I don't care who they place with. And that's how professionals should look at these particular situations, because even at 18 I was put out of her house. Yes, it could have it to me it was amongst a lot of different things. Fine, it was driven by money because maybe she really did need the financial help,
Right.
but it's a way that you go about needing financial help. It's like you don't put that burden off on the child or make the child feel like an outcast or make the child feel like they are a burden to you because you don't have enough money. Because for me as a biological parent, I would never let my child feel that. And I would do my best to make sure you have everything that I can provide for you and still have a safe home, and not let you know that you are a costly burden to me. And if you don't start dishing out some money, then you have to get out. That's a different kind of conversation versus just not having enough money to care for a person.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. So, um when you went to age out of care, you were still denied resources. There are certain resources that they do offer kids aging out of care, correct?
You're
And
right, depending on your placement status.
okay, so this whole placement status thing, is it to this day that depending on your placement status, you get some benefits and
Yes.
okay. So, depending on your placement status, you could get this independent living stipend,
Mhm.
and you asked for that, and they said there's nothing
Yes.
we can do.
Right. So when I went in at when I came back in contact with the system at 16, there was all of this conversation. So I had a level of care assessment completed, and they were saying that basically prior to this, she has had a very unstable life. She needs a life coach. She needs a guardian ad litem. We need extra. A guardian ad litem is another layer of oversight over a case. Like, she needs everything. And for me, it was like, one thing that I know working in the system is that when you receive a level of care assessment, you have to do everything on that level of care assessment when you go before a judge. I don't care what it is.
What is a
That is
level of care assessment?
a level of care assessment is a holistic report that breaks down every aspect of the person. It's done by a psychologist, and every yes, a doctor has to do it. So it just breaks down every level of a person, from what they cultural beliefs, what they, it just gives a holistic history of this person on different aspects of medical needs, school needs, what are your beliefs, what's your current placement status, and then like based on all the information that they gather, what relationships do you have. They make recommendations based off of that. They
Okay.
review your history and everything, and then they make recommendations on the direction that this case needs to go in.
Okay.
So they were based on my history and what the doctor gathered, and that was why I thought that it was so important for me to spell that out in my book so people can know, like, this is what was the plan when I came back in contact with the system at 16. And it was like, she needs a guardian ad litem, she needs independent living. um you need to continue to search for relationships just in case this one fails. You need to keep her away from this person, anybody who have sexually abused her, keep her away from them. These were all of the recommendations that were made. So one, I never got a guardian ad litem to provide oversight over my case. Two, they they denied me the road. At the time, it was called the road to independence stipend. I was denied that due to my placement status. And even it was, and I did the reason why I did my placements the way how I did like what it was, 5, 6, 7, 8, or some 6, 7, 8, something like that I did. It was like one of the chapters. It's
Yeah,
like,
I think it's 5, 6, 7, 8.
so I did that way because I did that way because I was flipping through different placements. So, um, and that was the ending of, that was me approaching 18, and that's what my life was like when I was approaching 18. So although I was in this non-relative placement, I was actually flipping through non-relative placements and licensed placements. So all of these conversations are being had. So I don't even have a stable 16, 17 years of my life. Those are not even stable for me. So when I'm talking to the judge the day of my last, up until my last court hearing, when I'm getting ready to turn 18, I'm explaining what my current mindset is and what I have going on in my life, and I'm like, I'm not stable.
Well,
And again,
you hadn't even graduated high school yet.
right, I hadn't graduated high school, and I'm in this very unstable situation, and I'm explaining this to the judge because every 6 months, for me, it's just kind of crazy how a person can come and ask you how you doing every month, ask you what do you need, all of these questions, and then just because you're turning 18, it's like all of that stops. Like, well, you didn't even make sure that the things that I told you that I needed, you didn't even make sure I had those things. And now that I'm turning 18 and I'm telling you that I really need help and I need some stability and I don't know what I'm doing, and you can't offer me anything but a tuition exemption, I'm I just really was in this state of mind where I just, it just got to the point where, like, it's nothing that you can do about it. You can't change their mind. They don't care how devastating your situation is. Legally, it's nothing that they could do about it. And the judge is always going to do what the law says. So it was just nothing that could be done. So I just was very frustrated, and it was just very disappointing to even have to hear them say, like, it's nothing that we could do for you, and to go home for the caregiver to say, well, you grown, like you're grown now, so you need to figure it out. It's like, well, who is going to teach me? It was just like this very, it was like very rough and very aggravating and frustrating to think that the people that are supposed to care for you really are following guidelines or whatever it
Mm,
was that they were following, and not doing what you actually needed for them to do for you as a child.
mm. Yeah, there's no human element to it.
Definitely not a human element. And you would think that, I was having a conversation with someone the other day, and they were saying, I was saying, when the system, I went to the DCF summit here in Florida this past December, and the current DCF secretary made a statement, and he said 10 children in foster care today are safer than they were 10 years ago. And that statement really spoke to me because I remember 10 years ago where I was, and I was saying like, wow, so you are acknowledging that the system failed children along the way. So I'm having this conversation with someone else, and they made the statement. I was like, now that the secretary has acknowledged that the children from 10 years ago, they have a story to tell because they were not safe, and you have just acknowledged that. Do the system come back and, look for those kids or give those children reparations or anything? And he was like, well, ultimately, your parents are the one who failed you. And I was like, okay. And then he was like, ultimately, society failed your parents. And
Mm,
I was like, okay, but think about it. Like, I just think that's one way to think about it. Like, that's one perspective to think about it, to throw off accountability from the system. But if I'm a cat, if you're a cat and you're stuck in a tree and I'm walking down the street, and I see that you're stuck in this tree, and I decide that I'm going to go help you, it's now my responsibility to ensure that you get out of this tree and out of this situation, because I have inserted myself into your business. So to leave you, I will ultimately feel that I failed you as well, along with your parents who didn't do what they were supposed to do, and along with society who have embarked all of these struggles and barriers that people encounter to even fall victim to situations to have their children removed. So for me, I was just like, okay, the system inserts themselves in people business, and then they go and they have their rules because they're supposed to be the smart ones, they're supposed to be the protectors, the safety net, and you remove children. Whatever happens to that child on that journey is now your responsibility. And to say that is anybody else's responsibility, you're throwing off accountability. And if you feel that way, then shut the whole system down.
mm. That's powerful stuff. And I know that it, like reading your book, I've done plenty of work and just being a social worker and being in a lot of space, I've done a bunch of work around privilege, but boy, when I was reading about like you going to jail and, sitting in jail on charges that weren't very, you know, that big of a deal for a kid your age, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, like so many other people would have spent zero time or one night or whatever. They would have gotten out. They would have been, bailed out by a parent or whatever. And to think that there's just like people on low level charges sitting in jail for God knows how long till their trial or whatever, just because they don't have someone to support them. That was a big deal. But you did, I mean, big deal for me. I was like, how privileged are, I mean, it's a privilege to have somebody to bail you out of jail, And I know that ultimately, there was a crime committed, but like even just how justice is served so much easier for people who have privilege or parents or, So, but despite all that, you went like gangbusters on your high school. You were behind. You went gangbusters on your classes and stuff. What made you like, screw it? This is the one thing I get is this tuition reimbursement, and I'm gonna make something of it. And you got your undergrad and your master's, both in social work.
No, I have a bachelor's in social work and a master's degree in public administration.
Right. Okay. So one, what drove you to like, I'm doing that? And then, what are your plans and hopes to do with those?
So when I was in my at Miami-Dade College getting my associate's degree, and I decided to change my major to social work, what drew me to that was the continued hiccups that I had along the way with utilizing the tuition exemption. So I'm in this I'm utilizing the resource, like, okay, I'm here, I'm showing up. And the process is to utilizing this waiver. Nobody never communicated the process to me, like, okay, Kenisha, here's the waiver, you have to turn it in every semester to the financial aid office. I was utilizing my financial aid refund checks to take care of my basic needs: rent, bus passes to get to and from school, my books, and things like that, lunch if you're in school all day. And to not tell me that I have to turn this paper in every semester was the worst thing that could have ever happened to me, because one semester the money was used to pay for my tuition instead of my basic needs, and now I don't have any other income. So this is like so detrimental to my life, and it allowed me to fall victim to back to my old habits of surviving. So I'm like, this is just really truly not fair. Like, you don't want to give me nothing, and the one thing that you give me, you don't even tell me how to utilize it. So it just ignited something in me that I was like, this has to change. And that's how I got into youth advocacy, where I was like, I need to tell people my experiences. I don't want any other person experiencing this. And I just thank God that I do have this, that I have the strength to overcome all of these barriers. And even if I fell victim to risky behaviors, that it didn't take my life down a path of me doing a long permanent sentence in prison or committing suicide, because these situations are very hard on your mental health. But in that moment, I'm like, I want to become a social worker. I believe in being the change that I want to see. Clearly, I can't tell people what I want. So I have to do it myself. So I was like, okay, I'm going to become a social worker. I'm going to go to school for social work. I'm going to become a dependency social worker. And this is what I want to do to help people, to help other youth in my situation that experience the system in the capacity that I did. Now, along the way, I'm doing this, I'm working, and I achieved this goal and became a dependency caseworker. So I was just so happy to be that. Like, okay, I'm here. In the beginning, I'm managing things, and things just start to go left. And then I start to see more things where it was like, I call myself a youth advocate, but I've been thinking how to change this term, because I advocate now, like, I'm like a child welfare advocate. So I advocate on systematic changes. I advocate for parents. I advocate for family members. So it's like I'm really this holistic advocate, where I'm not only talking about like children need this when they're aging out because of what I've seen. So as I'm thinking about another issue that was going on with the tuition exemption in Florida was, the law says that we can go to college until we're 28, but the education system says you only can use this waiver up until 120 credits,
Mm.
whether if this includes remedial classes or not. So that was another barrier along the way. So I'm thinking in my mind, systematically, why is it that you always give us a good resource, but then you put a barrier in place to not help us succeed? So I'm more driven. I love talking to clients. I love talking to people. Because people are just clients. I don't really like to call people clients,
Sure.
but I love talking to people. And I was thinking, I don't want an MSW.
Me neither. I
I
gotcha.
I didn't want an MSW because I was like, okay, I'm gonna go to graduate school, and I'm going to be talking about all of these hypothetical situations again. And I had already had experience in the field with real life experiences. So I was like, yeah, I did that in my bachelor's degree. So I was thinking, what really excites me? Policy excites me. I love to, how can we really come to have a conversation and implement policies, laws about how this can really help the world? How can we really be impactful to people? So this is what drove me to getting my master's degree in public administration. And then the different things that I was experiencing within the agency of, in my book, I talk a lot about overburdened workforce. I received a certificate in human resources policies and management. Nice. Because I'm just thinking about, well, how are people supposed to be treated in the workplace? Because I was working in a very chaotic, very toxic workplace that was so energy draining. So I really wanted to learn more about the human resource aspect of it, of running an organization or running a business. So I definitely got a certificate in that. But as far as my public administration degree, it's just always about me. Like, I even wanted to go to law school, but then I thought I'm on my journey. I'm just always thinking about how can I be the most effective. And I was like, I to defend the law, that's something I love to debate. I love to argue. I love to have conversations. That is so great. But I want to be more effective than that. I don't want to be in the courtroom with people trying to get them out of a situation. I want to write the policy. Let's put the policy in place so people don't even experience these things where you're in a court having to go through these situations unless you necessarily have to. Because I don't want people to think that I'm saying that, right, some situations don't exist, because they do. However, working in the system, I promise you, the cases that I have seen, as a person who didn't work in the system, I'm thinking that children were just out here being beaten, left here, and all these other places, and then experiencing all of these things with their parents. And then I get into the system, and most of the cases that come, majority of all the cases come in, are centered around poverty. And it just drives you crazy to the fact that, okay, her house is dirty. Well, her children don't have to be removed because her house is dirty. Like, is the roof going to cave in and kill them all? No. So, if you feel that way, you can put in a service for a cleaning service to clean this person's house to satisfy you, I assume, because this is just coming into somebody's house and telling them that their house is dirty. It's solely your opinion. So,
and even if the roof is going to fall in, resources for roofs.
Definitely that. In a hotel, let's put you guys in a hotel and let's go through the process to get this fixed, because of course a roof can be very costly. So poverty may affect why this roof isn't getting fixed. But then, for me, I go so much deeper, right? If you're in this, unless you are a homeowner, is it your responsibility to fix the roof? No, it's your landlord's responsibility. So why are you even in a home of that with the roof falling in? And why can't you move? Why? Because, okay, moving and housing is not affordable. So you go into all of these different things. So the ultimate question is, how do you fix the foster care? How do you fix the foster care crisis? When I hear that question, it's like we're thinking about the actual system. So after removal, when something that I've grown to think about from the perspective is that, so when your child is removed from you, the system relies on the community to re-strengthen this family. So it's like, in the beginning, you think that the system is this in-house situation where you come in and everything is within the system. And then, but working for it, it's like, no, Your children are removed, you are assigned to a case manager, and the system is just the overseer of everything that the community is going to do for you. So when we talk about fixing this crisis, we need to re-strengthen society. We need to reshape society. It's not about fixing the actual system. It's about what are all of the things that are inserted into a case plan that you need: therapy, drug rehabilitation, housing, employment. These are all things that day-to-day people have to have and go through. But why is that such a struggle for everyday people that are not that have no engagement with the system? Why are these things such a struggle? So if we fix those crises, then we are ultimately helping the foster care system.
Yeah, or another generation not enter care. Yeah. And you know
So
what?
I
That's the
definitely
overwhelming response I've been getting is like, how do we just get kids not entering? And where are we stepping up as a community in allowing people to feel comfortable coming forward and saying, I need help? But we don't. We judge, and we don't make people feel comfortable saying they need help. And they're certainly not going to go to the state who's going to open up an investigation.
and that is something that I have used my platform to talk about. So in front of people, I always let them know that this starts with you and ends with you. I just want you to know that
Mm.
it starts with you as a neighbor, as a teacher, as a doctor. I went to Miami-Dade College, and I was talking to students, and it was an engineer major in there, and he was like, thinking this has nothing to do with me. And I told him this has everything to do with you. You build the homes that we live in.
Mm.
And it's about shifting mindset and informing and educating people that this is really a community effort, and the system relies on you, whatever it is that you do. And that's why I said that I think that was very important for me to tell people that the system is like the foster care system and child welfare system is not this in-house all wraparound services system. No, we're just the overseers, and it's all about what's in your community.
Mm.
what what is it that, and that's another barrier for parents. Like, even like, as a person who worked in the system, I've seen a load of cases, right? So I would never say that some cases probably don't need oversight. Like, some cases they do need, some people do need oversight, or some people really do need that leg up. And coming into contact with the system can probably be the best thing for you at that present time in your life. And it always depends on, and that's why in my book I describe it as an individualized system, because it all depends on who you come in contact with. Like, I'm a case worker. If you get a case and I come into your life, I'm going to evaluate what are the barriers, what are the concerns. And like in my book, I express the many extra miles that I have taken to help families who just needed that leg up. Like, if I referred you to a community organization, and that community organization, like, we don't have funding right now, I was like, you know what, you just need a helping hand. Like, you are doing what you're supposed to do. You have a home for your for your children. I'll pay your light bill. Like, don't worry about it. I'll help you. Like, people just really need a leg up. And it was all, for me, it's about bringing those cases to the forefront, that we have to stop looking at parents as villains and really understand that people just, society is hard. I like to resort back to, I'm happy that this year is a presidential run, because look at the topics that presidents are arguing. These are stuff that we talk about every single day with people who are involved in social services. These are the issues that we have. If they're on a national level arguing these things, why are we penalizing people for not having it? We
Mm.
clearly know it's a national crisis, because this person has the aspirations to become the president of the United States of America, and they're saying, I'm going to fix the housing crisis in America. So, as a social worker working on these things, I just think that it's just very important to educate people, because people really do not. I promise you, people do not know. They don't understand. And it's just really about educating people that it's all about community. It's all about community. And people to like now we have the census that's coming up. Get counted. You have to complete the census because that determines what federal funding comes into your community. We talk about quality services and having those resources in our own communities where you're not a parent who lives in Miami-Dade, who lives in North Miami-Dade, and you have to go way down south, which is another barrier. Transportation is another barrier. And I only speak of that, of course, because I'm a Miami native. So those avenues and areas would definitely come off my tongue. But definitely just reminding the community that it starts and ends with you, and the system operates in that way too. We refer back out to the community. We
Mm-hmm.
intervene and we refer back out to the community, and foster parents are the community. Foster parent are your neighbors. Like, people really don't think about it that way, but that's how you have to, like, a foster home can be your neighbor. That aunt who has a caseworker coming in her house every month can be your neighbor.
It
So
can be
just
you.
know it can definitely be you too. But I just think about it in the capacity of, like, if when someone comes and say, "Hey, can I have a slice of bread?" and they're like, "No, why you coming to my house for?" Like, give
Right,
it to
yeah.
them, because
Exactly.
it starts with you and ends with you. If you have it to give, give. So that's definitely the message that I'm pushing on this book tour, for people to really understand, how it works, and to use the terminology so people can just really be educated. As I always say, foster care and the child welfare system and social services is not a secret. It's not a secret. People act like it's some special sauce that no, you can't know. No, you can know about this, because any day it can be you. I think that when they use the words, everybody is a paycheck away from being homeless. Any day, if the day you become homeless is the day your children can be removed from you. So if you a paycheck away from that, you are one step away from being in this predicament. Because the system, if a child protective investigator comes to your house and you don't have a house, your children are being removed. I don't care what you have going on or who you thought you was. They're gonna make that determination to remove your children. So if you one check away from being homeless, you one check away from having a dependency case.
Yeah, and not even that. I mean, I remember I was 13 and my mom popped me in the head, and I called the cops, and they, like, I went and lived with my aunt, and I had a social worker and all of that. Like, if you have a kid that's going to call the cops on you, you better watch what you do. I mean, and like like a lot of people pop their kids, right? But I guess I was just like, rebellious or whatever. So like anybody can be in this situation, and absolutely. I think that it all just gets back to being more open, putting ourselves in other people's shoes, more empathetic, and less judgmental.
Yep, I agree.
All right. Well, I'm going to show people that are on YouTube, at least. This is her book. It's called Labeled. It's her story. It's, amazing. I know personally, you can be a social worker like me and advocate for child welfare, but there is something about, like, no, I went through it all. I have personal experience. That's not what it's like for me. Like, that personal experience is going to be something that Kenisha already does and can stand on to get stuff done, and to really unite. So you can get her book on Amazon. Is that where you are going to tell people to get it?
So you can get the book on my website,
Okay.
three W's, of course, .kenishaanthony.com, or you can get the book at Books and Books online as well. Ebooks are only available on Amazon and Apple Books.
Okay, so I will just say this as somebody else that sells books. I'm mad at myself for saying go to Amazon. Go to her website and go to, what'd you say, Books on Books?
Books and Books.
Books
If you
and
live
Books.
in .com. And that's solely because going on this author journey, I've learned a lot. And Amazon does not allow hardcovers on their platforms. So this is why I have it exclusively on my website and on booksandbooks.com.
Well, they also, so I have a soft cover. They let my book on it, but they take $7 a book. And so I have to, my book's actually more expensive on Amazon than it is on my site, because I'm like, I have to cover those. That's crazy. So they take such a large amount. The good thing about Amazon is they're Amazon. So if somebody's looking for it, and you do want them to be able to find it. But grab her book. If you're a stable moments location, grab her book so that parents can take it from your facility and go read it, or anybody that's interested. It's a great look into an experience of not only a foster kid, but somebody who understands the system really well. And make sure, if you get it, you leave a review. I know reviews are really important, or shout out on Instagram, or anything that you can do to kind of raise awareness for other people getting the book. You want to share your handles?
So you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at About Kenisha. And I also have a book page, About Labeled. So, and I'll definitely be putting more educational pieces on the About Labeled page, but you can definitely follow me and my journey and learn more about me on my personal Instagram, which is About Kenisha.
And if you guys are listening to this and you're driving, or you can't write this down and you're not going to remember it, that's okay. It'll be in the show notes. I'll tag her in Instagram posts. But yeah, follow her, support her, share it out. This was a really good interview, Kenisha. You're rocking it out. I love you. I love your story. I love what you stand for. And I'm a cheerleader and rooting you on. And I hope to stay in touch. I'm in Florida too. I'm in Satellite Beach. So maybe I'll get to meet you in person sometime here.
Okay, can definitely put it on the schedule.
All right. Well, you have a great event this evening, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks.
All right. Bye-bye.